Good afternoon, everyone. We are in our study in the book of Deuteronomy. In chapter 25, you find that there is a discussion with regards to how they are to treat each other. So these are rules and laws pertaining to how they ought to live with each other within the family, within the community, and certain things which are pertinent that they must pay attention to. And right at the end of the chapter, there was a recollection of what happened to Amalek. And so let's begin by looking at verses 1 to 4 with regards to how things are in the community, the way they live, and how they should look at these things with regards to the principles that is being left for us to see. Now, in verse 1 of chapter 25, it says, if there is a dispute between men, dispute is a good word. The word here in dispute means there is a quarrel. They are contending with each other. So there is a strife. So there is an argument. So that would be a good way of expressing it. Now, when there is an argument, it means that there is no peace. And so the intent of this rule is that there needs to be peace in the community. And the community needs to resolve their problems. So if there is a problem, in this case, a quarrel between men, they come to court. Now, in this case, this is, well, I would say that there is going to be the place of judgment. This is what it means by court. It is a place where judgment can be imposed. And so in the modern day, we call it a court. It's more likely to be like a tribunal. There are people who will make decisions, and these are cases to be heard. And so it describes this, that the judges may judge them, and they justify the righteous. And the word justify here would mean acquit the righteous, and this would be the innocent. And the next part here is that they will condemn the wicked. This would mean the guilty one. So whenever there is a dispute, one would be right and one would be wrong. That is the point that is being discussed here. And so there is no peace between these people. And so somebody needs to step in to make that judgment. If it continues, the dispute can grow into something much bigger. And so the reason why God had given judges into this particular community and in the communities of the Israelites is to resolve the disputes so that peace can reign, that the innocent can be acquitted and the guilty shall be punished. That's fundamentally what that means. And then it shall be that if the wicked man deserves to be beaten. Now, this word here should read flogged or caned. This idea of caning, it has been around since ancient days. The guilty man, if it has been determined. Now, remember, in the previous few chapters, you find that there needs to be clarity as how to provide justice with regards to two or three witnesses, with regards to evidence. And so if that's one person who is found guilty and has to be flogged, then the judge will cause him to lie down. Now, this word lie down literally means, how should we say, lean over, uh, cause himself, will cause to lean over. So it's not really lying down, but it's definitely not standing up. He's bending over. I think bending over would be a better way of expressing it. Bending over. And then he will be flogged in front of the judge, right? According to the guilt, with a certain number of strikes. 40 blows he may give him, and no more, lest he should exceed this and beat him with many blows above this, and this will humiliate the brother. And so what is important is this: we need to understand that he is still a brother, even though he is guilty. He must not be humiliated, and he must not exceed striking him with more than 40 blows. And generally, what we find in the wisdom of the Jews is they do it up to number 39, right? Number 39, and they would stop. And the reason is just in case the count is wrong and that it should exceed and it would humiliate him. And so that was what they would practice. The next verse, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. And this is how it would be understood. First of all, it is about an ox, an animal, not human. Which means that if it's a person, then there is the chance to muzzle him. What does muzzle mean? Means to prevent from eating. So let me explain this a little bit. The rule here, and this is a law for animals, that as an ox is treading out the meal, this is treading the grain. And in Jewish law, they will read this as any animal that is used for work, that is to help in the production of food. And in this case, an ox will be stamping onto the wheat, grains to break the husk. And as the ox is breaking the grain and freeing the grain from the husk, and the ox tends to eat some of the grain. The rule here is that you should not and you will not muzzle. Muzzle means to prevent the ox from eating, putting something over the nose of the ox. And so the Jews will read that if it's a human, then the man can be eating from the produce that he is producing for the master, but the master can stop him from eating it. For example, if a man is actually helping out in the preparation of the figs or baking bread, as he is baking, he eats the produce. He is the owner or the master has the right to stop the man. Now, has the right doesn't mean he must, but he has the right to do that. But with the animal, this law seems to say that the owner of the animal shall leave the animal alone. And so anything that the animal tends to eat, that's left for the animal, and you should not muzzle, put something over the mouth to prevent him from eating. And that would be what this means. And so God says, do not mistreat the animal, But when it's a person, the person is actually earning his wages. And if he takes from the produce that he's hand making, well, it is really up to the master who owns the produce to decide whether to let him or to stop him. And that would be how verse 4 is reading. Now, verse 5 deals with a concept of the Levirate marriage. We read more of it here, but we have some examples in the book of Genesis with the regards of Judah, right? In Genesis chapter 38. And so now we look at the Levirate marriage. It's incorporated into the law. And so it says, if brothers dwell together, a couple of things which the Jews pay attention. Number one, they are brothers. And this would be brothers of a paternal nature, not maternal. So from the same father, because it involves inheritance, right? Inheritance. And if it involves inheritance, and these are brothers living together, which means that he is alive at the same point in time when one of them dies. So you notice the Jews pay close attention to the text. Together means they are alive, and one of them dies when they were both alive, one died. And both have inheritance. All right. And if they have inheritance, and the condition here is that he dies and has no son, and this has to deal with the issue of inheritance, that something has to be done with the share of this person or this brother. The widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family, which implies that the inheritance is not to go outside the family. Now it says here, the husband's brother. In verse 5, when it says the husband's brother, it means that how should we say? It means that it's the one who is still alive, right? Still alive, shall be intimate with her, take her as his wife, and this would be the widow of the dead brother, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. Now, a husband's brother is to help produce a heritage in the name of the brother. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed the name of the dead brother, and that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. Now, this is very interesting because I guess it has to be done in a way where it has to be very clear, right? Very clear in the sense that the brother has no son. No son. Now, by no son, I think we would have to understand that there is no children. Not necessarily a son as just a male child, but he has no son or daughter, because we have seen in the book of Numbers that if the person has a daughter, the daughter can marry somebody within the tribe, and so that the inheritance will stay with the tribe. But in this case, there is no children, so no son literally means no son or daughter, right? No son or daughter. And it shall be that the firstborn son, if there is one, will succeed the name of the dead brother, and that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. And in this case, the inheritance of the dead brother will go to the brother who took the widow for marriage, including his own share. And that's how the Levirate rule is. And then the firstborn son will be succeeding the name of the dead brother, so that this firstborn son will eventually inherit the the dead brother's inheritance. That would be the way to move forward, so that this firstborn son will be in the name of the dead brother. Now, this is strange to our ears, to many people, but in I think in many Asian culture, there is still this practice of the Levirate marriage. I remember having a friend who is just like that. The father married a wife, and she was not having any children. When the husband died, the brother married the widow and had my friend. And so it still existed in the 70s and 60s, right? And so the exception will come this way. This is a rule in verse 5. Now, in verse 7 says, if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, now there is a consequence when he does not do that. And the consequence is going to be one of shame. His wife's, his brother's wife will go up to the gate of the elders. It is suggested that this would be the court as well, to seek justice and say this. It says, my husband brother refuses to raise the name of a brother to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. Now, in the next case, but if he stands firm and says, now this word, he stands firm and says, has a bit of a problem in the translation. This is not stand firm. This should be stand up. And he must say this standing up. Right? Say this standing up. And the Jews would say that he needs to say this in Hebrew, not in any other language. It says that I do not want to take her. Now, this word here is in the Hebrew, I have no desire. Right? I have no desire. I have no desire to marry her or to take her. This would be to take as wife. Then his brother's wife shall come to him in front of all the elders. She should remove his sandals from his foot, spit in his face, and say, now this is also in Hebrew. Right? In Hebrew. And this is what is being said. It shall be done to the man who will not build up his father's house, right? So shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. Now, I think the Hebrew in verse 9 is a bit shorter. It says, thus shall it be done to a man who will not build up the household. And it is much shorter in the Hebrew, but it is a name that is pronounced to the man. And his name shall be called in Israel, and this would be in Hebrew. And in verse 9, verse 10, the name is the house of him who had his sandal removed. This would be Beit Halot Hana'al. Just 3 words. The house or the home of him who had his sandal removed. Anyone who is told that his sandal is removed means he has refused to marry his brother's wife. And that in itself is something which is supposed to be shameful, that he is not doing what needs to be done to propagate the brother's name, right? The brother's name. All of this is supposed to reinforce the name and the presence of the brother so that the brother's memory will continue in the progeny of the children that he would have with her. We come to our next segment. The next segment is about fighting, right? About fighting. Remember what I had said. The idea of fighting or struggling. Now, in this case, fight means to wrestle. As Jacob wrestled with the angel of the Lord, right? In the book of Genesis. This really is trying to fight and quarrel with each other in the form of fighting, right? In the form of fighting. You pull each other's hair or you punch each other, but this is a very physical encounter. And they are fighting together. And this is men fighting. The wife of one of the men comes near to rescue her husband from the one who is attacking him, puts out her hand and seizes him by the genitals, right? This is his private part. Private parts. This is the male private parts. And then the punishment seems, in a literal sense, appears to be very strict. It says, you shall cut off her hand. Your eye shall not pity her. Now, in this sense, you find that cut off her hand means she shall pay the price. There is a penalty for this case. It's not the chop off her hand, but there is a penalty because she has done something that how should we say, that would humble the man, right? So the idea of cut off her hand, and you would find in the later chapters, you find that that would really refer to punishment or penalty, but not in terms of cutting off her hand. And shall not pity her, even though she's at the defense of the husband, because of what her hand did to humiliate the man. Now, this is an ancient Hebrew practice where God values the progeny of a person. And if anyone stops the progeny of a person, that person can be punished. And that is why the culture there does not look well upon eunuchs, people who have had their private parts cut off, and especially those who are unable to produce children. And so in that culture, we have to see it in that context, that a punishment is employed upon anyone who directly affects the progeny of a person. All right. Next, verse 13. Verse 13 to 16 is about righteousness. Now, I just put this word here first, righteousness. Now, in this case, when we talk about righteousness, we are talking about doing what is right, right? Or the rightness in the eyes of God. So if you read verse 13, it says that you shall not have in your bag deferring weights, And by weight, it would be stones, right? This would be stones. One that is heavy and one that is light. What this would imply is that these stones look virtually alike. But in terms of weight, one is heavier than the other, which means that this will be used for weighing scales. And if that will be the case, it would allow this person to cheat. And so it may look alike, the person looking at the stones can't tell, but the weight will be different. Verse 14 is a parallel verse. You shall not have in your house, this one is in your bag, in your house, differing measures, a large and a small. Now, this word measures is an ephah, right? An ephah. This is for volume. And this would be the case when somebody comes and borrows some flour. And you cannot have the measure that looks alike, but actually one will contain more and one will contain less. This is a parallel, and this would be an A and a B. This is not to happen because this would be cheating. You would have the ability to fool the eye of the person who's buying from you or who is borrowing from you. And so the principle or the rule here would be this: you shall have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure. Now, all these are the part of the parallel 13 and 14. This would be verse 13 would be the weight or the stone is for the weight, and this would be for the volume as an ephah. What is a just and perfect weight and a just and perfect volume or ephah? Perfect means complete, right? This would mean complete. This word is shalem. You'll be surprised to find out shalem. Not 1 ounce less, right? Not 1 ounce less. A just weight and a perfect weight means that it is complete, it is shalem, it is not one thing less or one notch less. It is just because it is fair. That is what is being agreed upon. Whether it's a shekel of weight, it would not be 0.9 shekel of a weight. The measure will be 1 ephah. It will not be 0.9 of an ephah. That is what it means by a shalem and a tzedek, right? A shalem and a tzedek measure. Both of these is basically to say that the stone must be complete in its weight, in its totality, that it is not lighter or it is not heavier. And this is also very important. Shalem means to complete doing what you have committed, whether to God or to man. And this is what you would agree in weight, that this would be, say, 1 shekel. And when you place the stone, it must be 1 shekel. It cannot be less. And obviously, it should not be more. And then it says here that your days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. And so if you want to have lengthened days, to live long, this is the second thing. The first thing is honor your father and mother. The second thing is to have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure, which means that justice and fairness must prevail, else the whole society will go into chaos. Now, the warning is here. For all who do such things, all who behave unrighteously, are an abomination to the Lord your God. Now understand this. This would be an A and a B. Do such things, A. Behave unrighteously, B. This is talking about the same thing. This is an abomination to God. This is something which people do not understand. So let me just share with you. When you say this is injustice, this is actually injustice. Injustice means avail. This is a perverseness of justice, of what is right. A perverseness, right? It's also translated as evil or sin or iniquity. But in a more concrete way, injustice. If you do such a thing to have unequal weights or differing measures, God looks at people, right? All. This is about the people. The people who do this are behaving unjustly. This is injustice. They have perverted justice. What does it mean? It means that whatever is just and fair, this person who used the wrong weights, who is cheating, is seen as someone who has not complied to what he said he will do. He is not faithful to his words. He is hereby declared as unrighteous or unjust, or he has been perverting justice. When he's supposed to weigh 1 shekel, he only weighs 0.9 shekel. And God says, this is an abomination to me. This is disgusting to me. This is wicked. Right? This is disgusting. And this is to God. God is looking at people like that as a total disgust. Now, you'll find that in the prophet books later on, the society actually resorted to these things. God sent prophets to warn them, to teach them, but they never learned from it. And so God had to send the Assyrians and then the Babylonians to teach them not to be unjust in society. Now, of course, there are other injustice, which is perverting justice, judges taking bribes, powerful people oppressing the weak. Now, all of this is seen as Hamas later on. And that is also a more serious form of injustice. But even so, in this case, right here, I urge all of us to go back and think about it. In God's eyes, this is serious. There is no way that God is going to let this person off the hook. Why is God so severe with this? This is because it misrepresents God, who is just, who is fair. And so the children of Israel are supposed to reflect God when they obey the laws of God. And so when they are fair and use complete and just weights, they reflect God to be fair in what they do. And that is the only right thing to do. You cannot do anything different. And so by doing so and not cheating and treating everybody fairly, it reflects the justice of God. And when they don't, God says that is injustice, and God will be looking for a reason to destroy them. And that would be something that God wants the Israelites to bear at the back of their minds. These things that are repeated in chapter 25 is severe in the days to come. not so much in the left-right marriage, but when they misrepresent God, God will deal with them in the days to come. In our final segment, it is about the Amalekites. Now, in 1 Samuel chapter 15, when King Saul was put to task to destroy King Agag of the Amalekites, animals, children, women, and men. And he was given a very clear message, but unfortunately, when we read 1 Samuel chapter 15, he spared King Agag, he spared certain animals, and in his mind, it was for sacrifice purposes. Why waste good animals? The background of that story will come from this passage here, Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 17 to 19. So it says this: remember what Amalek did to you on the way you were coming out of Egypt. Read Exodus chapter 17. Exodus chapter 17 appears to not have told us a lot of his background, but it says here how Amalek, now we talk about Amalek as a people, their descendants, but it's used as a he met you on the way while they passed the Red Sea and went towards Sinai in Rephidim. He attacked your rear ranks, came after the back part where they were the weakest. And it says here, and all the stragglers of the rear. Now, I need to retranslate this, the stragglers at the rear. This idea of stragglers at the rear, these would be all the feeble, right? Feeble, the weak at the back. They are the ones who are unsteady, you know, at the back. When you were tired and weary. Now, what do you mean tired and weary? If you go back and read Exodus 17, it was at a time when they had nothing to drink, and so they had water from the rock. And you find that it was a time when they were at their lowest since coming out of Egypt. And the Amalekites took the opportunity to attempt to destroy the Israelites. And you would remember the story in Exodus 17. Moses went up the hill, and Aaron and Hur, one on either side, was holding up the hand of Moses. Now, the word for holding up to support the hand of Moses is our base word faith, emet, or faithfulness or support. And then right below the hill would have Joshua fighting the Amalekites. And so the Amalekite, or he, did not fear God. So this is the fault of the Amalekites. They did not fear God. This is their crime. Can you imagine? When one does not fear God, there is a retribution. And in this case, it was a severe retribution because the Amalekites was trying to destroy the Israelites. And so it says, therefore it shall be. What is going to happen is when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance. This means that after they have received the land, this would be after Joshua, after the book of Joshua, when the land was distributed. And so we are reminded that this incident would have taken place in 1 Samuel chapter 15 under King Saul. Not only that they have distributed the land, they even had a king. that you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. Now, let me just close by giving us the Hebrew of this statement. It says that you shall blot out. This idea is to obliterate. Okay? It is to erase. Now, in the old days, they would rub with oil. That is an eraser. That is to remove marks, right? To wipe out. So to blot out, to wipe mark. So if this was the Amalek, and this, so blotting out gives us this picture like that. And by the time you finish, there will be no remembrance. Nobody will remember the Amalek. Nobody will speak about the Amalek. Nobody will recollect the Amalek. Nobody will ever remember Amalek from the under part of Hashemayim, which means that if this was the sky and there were people around, nobody will remember who Amalek is at the end of the day. That is how serious God wants to remove Amalek. And so they are told, when you get into the land, you shall not forget. And how did God make them not forget? Well, God sent Samuel to Saul to remind him what to do with the Amalekites and King Agag. And they are to blot out. Now, the consequence of 1 Samuel 15 when Saul did not. Now, what was the error of King Saul? Well, God gave the instructions to blot out right here. No, blot out the remembrance of Amalek, man, women, children, and animals, so that nobody can say, oh, this donkey came from the Amalekites. So none of these will be remembered. Their name will not be remembered. But King Saul chose to spare King Agag and some animals. That means that King Saul did not follow in entirety the instructions of God. And in God's mind, it means that he did not comply. And so God says, I do not want you. I want to look for a man after my own heart, a man who would follow exactly the instructions I give him, and he would deliver exactly what I say. And that would be David. And here lies the challenge. Because Saul did not kill King Agag, there were people that were left out. The Agagites would be eventually the pain of Israel in the days of Queen Esther. And in the days of Queen Esther, many hundreds of years down the road, the descendants of King Agag, the Amalekite, in the form of Haman, decided to destroy and wipe out the Israelites and the Jews in one day. And that would, I leave it to you to read the book of Esther. And so the destruction of the Amalekites came from this background. And when in the ancient times, when they failed to do that, then problems will come back and haunt them in many hundreds of years to come. And the Agagite, who are Amalekite, and Amalek is a descendant of Esau. And they become enemies all the way through. And by leaving them around, they became the perennial enemies, forever haunting the Israelites. And so with this I leave chapter 25 for you to go and review that the rules that God gives has a purpose. And notice, destruction of the Amalekite is a law. As much as you shall not muzzle an ox, destroying the Amalekite is part of this chapter and part of the rules that God has given to the Israelites. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.